The first Leprechaun, released in 1993 with a budget of a mere $900,000, certainly reflects many things about horror films of the time, though it also interestingly feels like the last gasp of a dying film archetype. The slasher genre was on its last legs in the early 90s after various previously beloved franchises had fallen into the territory of being, let's just say, not very good. But Leprechaun is a special case. It understood what was happening to its subgenre and fully embraced it, seemingly taking pride in being ridiculous, stupid, and flat-out terrible. And though that doesn't make it some subversive comedic masterpiece, it lends it a level of self-awareness and resulting respect of which many other films of the same era were entirely void. From the opening scene onward, the film waves its tiny budget and ridiculous premise like a prideful banner, such as with the ridiculous first death in the movie, where this lady has the funniest fall down the stairs in the annals of cinema.
I've fallen, and I can't get up!
Admittedly, the first scene isn't too terrible, having an interesting setup. The design of the leprechaun immediately stands out as pretty damn good and very memorable. Like, seriously, this is one of the best and most recognizable horror villain designs of all time. And with Warwick Davis in the titular role being a lovable, evil rapscallion, he's absolutely the true protagonist of the film and franchise. In fact, I'd say this movie is only worth watching because of him. This is proven further when we're introduced to the alleged real main character, played by Jennifer Aniston, who got famous a year after this movie for being in the show named after what you don't have. It's funny to me how she kind of got her start in this role, which, similar to Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4, probably still haunts her to this day. Or maybe not, since the movies she's been in recently honestly make Leprechaun look like the fucking glory days in comparison. She's absolutely awful here, though. The most annoying, stereotypical teenage girl character ever. She whines and complains about the place in North Dakota that her dad rented out for them to stay in over the summer. Admittedly, the dad's an idiot for picking this house because it is a rundown piece of trash, but she's still as annoying about it as possible. So we're off to a bad start with these two, and it's not made much better with the introduction of a third character. He's some total himbo who, with one robotic interaction containing some of the most Martian-esque dialogue of all time, manages to change the girl's mind about the house. This whole plot sounds like the setup for a terrible joke. An annoying bitch, her clueless dad, and the hottest guy in North Dakota walk into a house with a leprechaun. Whatever's coming next has got to be the most spectacular and hilarious punchline ever. Nope, it's not. Well, we are introduced to the other two characters, who are this scrappy little kid and his best friend, who's an adult man with mental disabilities that make him kind of think like a child as well. They're actually the heart of the movie and are somewhat likable, but only really by a matter of comparison with these other dopes. They actually cause some pretty funny scenes, such as when the older guy, Ozzy, accidentally releases the leprechaun and sounds like an absolute madman telling the others about what he saw. It's humorous, as are a few other intentional jokes in the first half of the movie. Whether it be slightly clever gags or laughably bad dialogue, this movie is definitely entertaining. There's also a pretty unique kill where the leprechaun uses a pogo stick and bounces on a coin collector. It's brutal, somewhat creative, and kind of hilarious, but also ruined completely by the terrible editing. But hey, I'm just glad he killed a coin collector. Those guys are so annoying. Wait, what? In general, this movie excels at just making Leprechaun into the most likable character. For example, he rides around in wacky little vehicles that somehow, at one point, manage to push over a pickup truck. Wow, this is breathtakingly stupid. Like, seriously, who taught this movie's writers physics? Ben Shapiro? I do also have to give them credit for this absolutely savage moment where they roast Lucky Charms. Yikes, if Leprechaun doesn't like your cereal, you know it's bad. That dude eats crickets, for God's sake. The real issue is that outside of a few oddball moments and a few slight highlights, The movie can basically be summarized by this terrible scene of Leprechaun gearing up. Jarring editing, inappropriate music, awkward grunting sounds in the background, and just nothing interesting going on. At the very least, the finale has a few good moments, like the sweet effect of Lep's hand being cut off, crawling up the door frame and finding its way back to him, the hilarious bit where he pretends to be an old guy and then chases Jennifer Aniston in a wheelchair, him pretending to be a cop and tricking the other characters, and this final line that's actually kind of badass.
Fuck you, Lucky Charms.
Overall, the finale and the entire movie may be low quality, at times nonsensical and sporadic, and in a lot of respects annoying or nothing special, but it's at least entertaining trash with some fun moments and an iconic villain. Still, there's just not much to love here outside of the occasional gag. It's worth watching for the sake of Leprechaun as a character, but as a movie, it's fucking terrible. 1 out of 5. But an entertaining 1 out of 5.
Okay, just like you practiced. The crowd goes wild, but not the judges. They're not gonna give me that golden buzzer unless I really do something crazy. Wait a minute. There we go. Ah. Oh, good day, my boy. Wait, what are you doing? Oh, shit. Nothing. Definitely not trying to see what crazy things I can eat to get me to win America's Got Talent or anything like that. What? I know, right? And I even had a whole sob story montage prepared and everything.
WalterTGB's life was turned upside down last year when his pet albatross was diagnosed with super cancer. We know the last contestant's dad had cancer, but have you ever heard of super cancer? It's way sadder.
That's right. So let me win, Simon. Well, actually, me lad, I was thinking maybe I could stay with you. I've been down on my luck lately and, well, it is in the generous spirit of the holiday of St. Patrick's Day after all. Sure, but I thought you'd have plenty of money. You had that pot of gold and everything, right? Yeah, about that. Hello, sir. I'll have 100 gold shillings for that there NFT, please. Oh, well, that's fine. Just let me know. Is there anything I need to adjust for you while you stay here? Yes, if you don't mind, I'll just need one small help in the bathroom. Oh yeah, I can definitely give you a step stool for the toilet if you can't reach. I had something else in mind, my lad. You know, I'm happy to do these kind of things for you, but why in the hell are you having me put a disc up against a bathroom wall? Well, you see, there once was a lep who stayed up all night, trying to make his shillelagh feel right, but it didn't work, for to complete his soul, the little green gremlin needed a glory hole. Oh, God, what? Still a better roommate than Michael Jackson.
The first movie was an interesting experiment, but it paid off with a return of $8 million. It's hilarious that something like Leprechaun is more profitable than almost any major movie production these days. So of course we got a sequel a year later, and honestly one with a lot going for it. For example, the opening scene in Ireland 1,000 years ago introduces an interesting new setup following Leprechaun and his search for the ancestor of his previously sought-after bride. More fantasy elements are present here in general, from this scene to the really cool set of Leprechaun's lair. I'm quite a fan of this move. It gives the movie some more character. Additionally, the movie takes place in Los Angeles, meaning we get far more interesting sets with a lot more variety all around compared to North Dakota. From bars to go-kart tracks, there's more to enjoy here than before. And while one of the main characters is once again an unlikable, annoying young woman, the actual protagonist is named Cody. He's also kind of a doofus and does some truly idiotic nonsense, but he's the likable sort of idiot who's trying to do right by everyone and is faced with a lot of difficulties from his surroundings. He reminds me a bit of Charlie from Fright Night, actually. The pacing is still super awkward, but at least the more creative shots, sets, and better lighting help things to be far more engaging throughout, especially because of the truly artistic, poetic graffiti on these bathroom walls. In all seriousness, they really went above and beyond here with trying to improve stuff. The effects of Leprechaun coming out of the tree and then using it to trap this poor homeless man are honestly extremely good, and he's got more spunk and character to him than ever before. The melodrama of Bridget, that's Cody's girlfriend, getting mad with him and leaving him to flirt with another guy is insufferable and really sucks. But at least it leads to one of the funniest scenes I think I've ever seen in any movie. Leprechaun tricks this guy into thinking he's going to kiss the girl's chest, but then, in the most brilliant cut of all time, it's revealed that it's actually 2 spinning blades. Genius. Lep's antics just get better, such as him ripping a guy's finger off in the middle of the city, and mixed with the introduction of a new main character who's just as scummy and lovable, things really get going in the right direction. Morty is like the Grunkle Stan of his time. He's truly fantastic and has various hilarious lines throughout the whole movie. In fact, I think this movie could have been really good if it was just about Morty and Leprechaun feuding over gold or something. But things just go all wrong during the actual action scenes. Some elements are there, such as kinetic camera work and some decent practical effects, but everything happens too abruptly and with some truly awful acting as the dingleberry on top. This happens various times in the movie where a perfectly fine scene is just interrupted and turns into incomprehensible mush. Plus, the scene of Lep acting creepy to Bridget after kidnapping her really damages the lighthearted, fun nature of the rest of the film. Like, seriously, this part made me uncomfortable as hell. I felt like I was watching the Poughkeepsie tapes again, but not in a good way. At least there are a few alright sequences, such as them escaping from the apartment, or Cody's clever plan to trap Leprechaun in the safe, but those are both overshadowed by the 2 best parts of the whole movie, the bar scene and the coffee shop scene. The gag of tons of little people dressed as leprechauns being in the bar and confusing the hell out of Cody, Lep's meme-worthy face in this shot, and last but not least, one of the most clever references I've seen in a while.
Let's cheer him on. He's one of us. 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 One of us.
And in the coffee shop, we're treated to a brutal, very interesting kill using something I've never even thought of being a murder weapon before, an espresso machine. Not just this, but also another hilarious little moment.
You kill me.
This bit where the pot of gold grows in Morty's stomach uses a pretty good and grotesque effect, but it also drags on and, to be honest, pisses me off. Man, why did Morty have to die? Why couldn't it have been Bridget instead? Oh well, then we're thrown into one of the worst bits of the movie, the finale. It drags on, not being salvaged too much at all by the design of Lep's lair, and puts the idiotic romance between Cody and Bridget front and center, which of course isn't the best decision if you ask me. But that all pales in comparison to the ending of this movie. Now let me show you, because I seriously couldn't believe my eyes after seeing this. That was it. That abrupt cut. That was it. This movie in general is very perplexing. I kind of like it. I mean, it's really funny and intentionally so most of the time. However, it's also plagued by the terrible relationship storyline, the general low-quality characters and editing that plagues this type of movie, and, of course, an awful ending. In general, a fun movie that I'd probably rewatch gladly, but I can't bring myself to call this any better than subpar in an objective sense. But it does seem like the series is improving, so I'm optimistic. For now, a 2 out of 5. With the third movie in this oddball franchise, we're pushed into Las Vegas, and while it took Jason a whopping 8 movies to finally move to a famous city and cause mischief, Leprechaun has been doing it ever since it became a series. Funnily enough, I had just watched The Hangover the day before I watched this movie. I guess I was on a Vegas streak or something. Surprise, surprise, the characters absolutely suck in this movie. The main characters are once again an uninteresting couple, but paired with a gaggle of scumbags working at a casino I couldn't care less about, and a pawn shop owner who feuds with Leprechaun for a bit, but only to ultimately die pathetically, this movie completely fails on the front of good characters. Sorry guys, but there's no underrated hero here like Morty in the last film. Lep's still as great as ever, pulling some funny shenanigans, though he's not in as much of the movie compared to these moronic human characters, or at least that's what it feels like. The setup of Lep missing 1 gold shilling from his pot is extremely uninteresting, and though the way the shilling's wish-granting powers lead to all kinds of antics is somewhat redeeming, this entire premise is basically just recycled from the last part of the first film. And man, the main character of Scott is a really unlikable idiot. He's explicitly told not to gamble in the casino where he's already breaking the law due to being underage. But this dude goes on to bet his college tuition money at the roulette table. What a moron! This movie is at least technically more impressive, which is surprising as it was the first movie in the series to go straight to DVD. Storylines do flow together more naturally, and it does feel like a more cohesive plot, but at the same time, the constant rushing between locations and way too much going on at a given moment just makes it hard to focus. They may cram in tons of cute little moments like Lep meeting an Elvis impersonator, but the movie overall feels bloated and overly ambitious, whereas the last 2 movies knew they were ridiculous and just kept it to simple, fun stupidity. The first 40 or so minutes are absolutely insufferable. Are they dumb? Yes, but I don't mind. Are they ridiculous? Yes, but I don't mind. But I draw the line when a Leprechaun movie is boring. However, we are treated to some truly absurd things in the second half of the film, such as this scene where a wish tricks the main love interest into falling in love with her boss. It's cringeworthy, but just self-aware enough to be kind of funny.
Mandatory drug testing for all employees. That's it.
There's also this underrated little moment where 2 thugs have some banter about their favorite kinds of underwear. It's bizarre, but actually kind of funny because of how it contrasts with the rest of the movie and especially these characters' general attitudes and demeanors. But then we come to the truly weird stuff. You see, halfway through the movie, Scott gets bitten by Lep and gets his shamrock-shake blood into his system through the wound, which ends up turning him into a leprechaun. It's a very unique and interesting idea, I'll give them that. Also, the fact his blood is green must mean that Lep is actually related to Michael Myers from Halloween 6. Oh my god, my fanfiction might actually come true. In general, this movie is just absolutely idiotic, sometimes in a good way, like this bit where the Leprechaun is on TV doing parodies of different commercials, the various creative kills, some of them really pushing the envelope of my tolerance for this franchise's nonsense, like the inflation one, and the clever satirical critique of the US healthcare system near the end are all just a treat.
Wow. Should I order a few more tests, Doctor?
Well, let's see. He can afford an MRI. And let's give him a couple of more EKGs. And hey, he could use a spinal tap.
And it all ends with a pretty funny parody of Return of the Jedi, which is the cherry on top. You know, the movie may start off really rocky and doesn't have any good characters other than Leprechaun, but it does still have a few enjoyable moments and overall manages to be admirably ridiculous, like the second film. Is it as good or enjoyable as that one? Definitely not, but it's at least better than the first one. 1.5 out of 5.
Hello, sir. I hope you're having a nice day. I'd like to make a bet with all of the money in my international currency collection, please. And what will that be, sir? I bet that the next Leprechaun movie is actually going to be fantastic. I don't know. How much money is it? Wait a minute, I'm sorry. Did you just say you think the next Leprechaun movie is going to be good? Not just good. Fantastic is what I said. I can't believe what I'm hearing. You're telling me you think that Leprechaun 4, where he goes to space, is gonna be a fantastic movie? You're damn right. And you're damn stupid. Man, I'm not gonna let you just throw away all your money like that and get your life together. Jesus Christ. Uh-oh.
Aside from having perhaps the most ridiculous title in the history of horror cinema, Leprechaun 4 in Space truly exceeded all of my expectations. By which I mean expectations of how fucking terrible it would be. It kicks off with some of the worst CGI I've ever seen, which I totally understand due to the budget. Believe me, I wasn't expecting this movie to look good, but for Christ's sake, if you have such a pathetically low budget, why make a space movie with a bunch of crazy effects? In fact, the whole movie feels like a bizarre fever dream that shouldn't even exist. The simple premise of Leprechaun in Space could honestly be used to make a hilarious, ridiculous, and self-aware horror comedy, but this movie unfortunately didn't get the memo and instead tries to be a ripoff of Aliens and Star Wars. Trying to copy arguably the greatest sci-fi movies of all time isn't an endeavor exclusive to this film, but it's truly insulting how badly they butcher the genre. I'm not even usually a big sci-fi fan, but with the cheap as hell sets, awful effects, and characters so one-dimensional they give Flat Stanley a sidestep for his money, this made me feel like I was being personally insulted by the filmmakers. I mean, it's like they were pissing all over the legacy of previous science fiction films. Speaking of pissing on stuff, the setup for this movie is that Leprechaun tries to become a space king by marrying a space princess, is killed by a team of Marines that definitely don't copy the movie Aliens, and then has his corpse pissed on by one of the Marines. This causes a beam of magic to come out and zap the dude's wiener. And due to this, we're treated to one of the most shocking scenes I've ever witnessed. Leprechaun climbs out of the dude's penis. I've heard of morning wood, but damn! Or maybe this is morning gold?
Well, you know, there's only one way to find out if it's gold. Bite it.
There's some absolutely awful, forced romantic tension between this himbo and this bimbo, who, interestingly enough, is played by the news reporter from Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
You know what? Good for her. I hope she's using this new career as an opportunity to distance herself from the trauma of being in this terrible fucking movie.
Every single character in this movie is truly awful. Even Lep isn't in it very much, and when he is, it's all just rehashed, unoriginal, and often very unfunny crap. It feels like they're just going through the motions, and in many regards, this shouldn't be a Leprechaun movie at all. There's a whole other storyline with this German Alfred Hitchcock-looking dude who talks like a space Nazi.
Yes. I would have been the first computer with an organic structure.
He's injected with DNA, which apparently is just blue Gatorade, never knew that before, a spider and a scorpion, turning him into a disgusting monster in the last act of the film. Now, admittedly, this thing's design and practical effects are seriously good, but it's so bizarre and out of place. This movie is so strange, as it hops from boring negotiations about the pay rate of the Marines 1 minute to laughably cheesy dialogue another.
I am now Mitten Spider.
There's so much dumb nonsense in the movie that it's almost hard to cover it all, but basically they waste a ton of time with Leprechaun hopping around the ship and killing people in very lame, often boring ways. All the sci-fi stuff tries way too hard to be like a cheesy B-movie, but it fails miserably, whereas the last two films were just self-aware, trashy, and had fun with themselves. Honestly, outside of a few funny moments like this guy getting his face flattened, the laughable dialogue, or this joke,
real vacation spot.
I've seen worse. You ever been to Detroit?
as well as the effects of Mittenspider, this movie has nothing redeemable about it. Leprechaun is the lamest he's ever been, the characters are the worst they've ever been, the effects are unbearable, and worst of all, the movie is boring. I can handle all that other stuff. I think I know I'm not exactly getting the fucking Criterion Collection with this franchise. But boring? That's the cardinal sin. These movies need to be fun and funny, and if they are, then I can ignore anything else and enjoy myself. But with this piece of filth, I can find practically nothing even remotely worth praising. Well, at least it's the rare horror film where the black guy lives until the end, so there's something. 0.5 out of 5. One of the worst films I've ever seen, and Lep's middle finger floating in space basically sums up the filmmaker's attitudes toward all of us watching. Shame on me for getting myself into this series, I guess.
You know, maybe I've actually been too harsh on this movie, because there's a scene I forgot to mention in which this very macho drill sergeant character actually cross-dresses and does a drag performance. Wow. This movie is actually a brilliant exploration of gender nonconformity and a critique of toxic masculinity. I can't believe I ever doubted you, Leprechaun 4 in space. I'm sorry I ever doubted you. You're a masterpiece. Mwah! Oh, God, why does that taste like Leprechaun?
Well, guys, they did it. They came up with a more ridiculous concept and title than Leprechaun in Space. This movie is a lot like what you'd expect. It's Leprechaun in the hood, meaning we get to see him interact with corrupt and violent music producers, prostitutes, and our main characters, a group of budding, aspiring hip-hop artists. It all kicks off in the 70s, in fact, with an opening that doesn't show much promise. Lep being turned into a statue is recycled, but the statue looks terrible here, and the first kill with a hair comb is incredibly lame. But at least we're treated to a funny gag where this one guy pulls a baseball bat out of his afro, as well as this unbelievable quote from Lep.
Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty! Free at last!
I'm not sure whether that's really funny or just really messed up, but either way, it made me laugh my ass off. Soon after this lame opening, though, the movie shows a lot more promise with this trio of protagonists, all of whom are played very well. And I don't just mean for a Leprechaun movie, I mean these actors actually do a great job. And in fact, every major character is played very well here. These main characters feel more down-to-earth and relatable than any of the other trash in previous films. They aren't as funny and charming as some characters in Leprechaun 2 or 3, but they have legitimate heart and some sensible motivations that got me seriously invested in their stories. It may sound ridiculous, it may sound like I've lost my mind, but Leprechaun in the Hood actually has well-written, well-acted characters. It's not just the way that they talk about chemistry and Tony Robbins while speaking AAVE as a funny juxtaposition, because their struggle to get to the top of a difficult, harsh industry while trying to maintain a positive outlook and not descend into crime is extremely compelling. Plus, it helps that their songs are actually way better than any of the garbage music included in previous Leprechaun movies, most of which sounded like a squeaky shoe. Why is the shoe squeaky, though? Maybe because it stepped in the pile of shit that is this franchise. Another part of this movie that works quite well is the inclusion of Ice-T as the human villain Mac Daddy, a threatening and intimidating character who I found sometimes more interesting than Leprechaun. He's a formidable foe, which is demonstrated brilliantly by this first scene of him yelling on the phone. But let's not forget about the Green Mischief Maker himself. Leprechaun isn't in this movie as much as some of the others, but when he is, it's some of the best he's ever been, and the other characters are good enough to keep the whole movie entertaining, even when he's not there. Smoking weed, having sex with prostitutes, and learning how to speak slang is a journey for Lep's character that is just as hilarious and delightful to watch as it sounds. And not just that, but Lep is also the wisest here that he's ever been.
A friend with weed is a friend indeed. But a friend with gold is the best, I'm told.
Some very lame action scenes overutilize slow-mo or kill characters off screen, but it's kind of made irrelevant by the strength of the overall plot here. You see, the three guys steal from Mac Daddy, taking a golden flute in the process. It turns out that the flute actually has the power to manipulate people, and they begin abusing it to make it big in the music industry. Their descent into desperation and greed is really interesting to watch, especially because they're always met with heavy consequences for their actions, as the deaths of two of the members are by far the most memorable, impactful kills in this series. Not because they're done by inflating a woman until she bursts or whatever bullshit, but because I cared about the characters. There are multiple entertaining segments, from one of them basically making Batman Arkham explosive gel, to this funny bit with the main characters as blind grandma not knowing who Leprechaun is, or this funny moment that almost feels like Scooby-Doo.
Right. Right.
Right.
Or, wait, is that Coolio? Damn, that is a truly awesome cameo. Step aside CGI Marvel nonsense, this is how you do fan service. Of course, tons of parts are super cheap or stupid. I'm not going to act like this movie is written super well all the time, but the fact it sometimes is astounding. It rehashes some overly used tropes from the rest of the series, there are some technical issues like the lip syncing during musical segment, and there's this really awkward bit including a transgender character that definitely shows the movie's age.
Gonna find your way out, baby, or you just didn't want to leave?
I didn't come to play with fruit. I only seek me magic flute.
Yikes. I also hate the inclusion of these useless zombie girl minions, but at least it leads to this funny sequence near the end where the two remaining guys need to dress up like women and slip Leprechaun some weed made out of a 4-leaf clover. I mean, come on, just tell me you wouldn't love to watch that. In general, the movie is really damn funny, and often intentionally so, just like Leprechaun 2. It's got good characters who are played well, some memorable kills, and the best story of the whole series by far. Even if some parts are very cheap or stupid, such as this nonsensical plot twist at the end that P is actually a zombie being controlled by Lep, this is by far the best entry in the series if you ask me. In part because it could be a good movie if Leprechaun wasn't in it and the budget was higher. But as it stands, I enjoyed and liked this one more than any of the others, though Leprechaun 2 is still close. I'm not exactly willing to go very high with this series, but this one, yeah, I had fun, and the Leprechaun music number at the end is probably the best thing I've seen in a while, so I'll give this movie a 2.5 out of 5. I found myself somewhat looking forward to this supposedly direct sequel to the first of Lep's hood-based adventures, and with this stylistically creative opening bringing in fantasy elements and using the medium of a storybook animation to tell us an interesting origin story for Leprechaun, my excitement just kept growing. The first scene brought excitement down to intrigue, as it was plagued by awkward pacing and editing, as well as some truly horrendous special effects, but at the very least, there was a very cool gothic feeling to it in which Leprechaun became sort of like a vampire-esque creature defeated with religious objects by a priest. In addition to this, he has a really cool new look that reinforces this. However, otherwise this movie looks absolutely awful. For example, the fakest looking puddle of blood in cinematic history. We've gone from excitement to intrigue, but once the actual characters come in, that completely dies. These are extremely unlikable, uninteresting, and one-dimensional characters, so essentially the opposite of the great ones from this movie's predecessor. Their awful acting and boringly written behavior make the first half of this movie pretty awful and uninteresting for the most part, although there are a few moments here and there that are kind of funny, like this bit that reminds me of that old game Road Rash, this guy's hilarious post-Zaza smell face, and this fantastic exchange about the use of the N-word.
Filled with clovers, ninja.
Ninja? Nigga, did you just call me a ninja?
Hey, man, hey. You need to get out more, man.
Way too many scenes, though, are just full of lame melodrama and excessive lyrical music in the background. It's truly a slog to watch, but every once in a while, they make me laugh my ass off by including the most unbelievable scene transitions ever. Seriously, these are literal PowerPoint transitions. The horror side of the movie does pick up a bit in the second half, such as with this action segment, or the scene of Leprechaun fighting police officers and hilariously taking off one of the cop's legs. Shockingly, this effect is actually pretty believable. A few other moments are a bit amusing, such as Leprechaun being torched by a homemade flamethrower.
I like my girls nice and clean.
This joke about Leprechaun not being able to reach the car pedals, and especially the truly great scene where Leprechaun's ominous monologue is interrupted by a guy's phone call. Seriously, this is super funny and by far the best part of the movie.
Stolen from me.
Hold on. Yeah. Oh, hey, baby. How you doing?
Or, well, maybe this is actually the best part.
What's up, ninjas?
In fact, it's just this entire segment here. It only lasts like 3 minutes, but the 2 clips I've already shown, as well as the kill where Leprechaun rips the guy's heart out after he exhausts himself trying to win a fistfight, which honestly feels like an homage to Jason Takes Manhattan, are truly fantastic parts of an otherwise terrible movie. Seriously, stuff like this is the only reason to watch it, because the finale that ensues is absolutely atrocious. There are like 5 or 6 parts where they could have ended it and killed Leprechaun, but it just keeps on going and going. I don't give a damn about the characters whatsoever, though, so it's just extremely boring and borderline unwatchable. Not to mention when they shoot Leprechaun, some weird-ass orbs start flying out of his body. What are they, trying to reference all of the terrible Friday the 13th movies? There's not much more to say, honestly. This movie has a few funny bits here and there, but is extremely and obviously cheap more than any of the others, has some of the most forgettable characters even by Leprechaun movie standards, and has an opening and closing half hour that both drag on. Similarly to the first movie, it's a terrible movie with a few good little moments, so I'll give it the same score of 1 out of 5.
I still cannot believe they used all of those terrible, outdated transitions. I mean, it makes it impossible to take this damn movie seriously. Like, damn, aren't these out-of-date transitions just a curse on the ability of any piece of media to succeed? It's ridiculous, I'm telling you.
Hand it over.
Whoa, wait a minute. That is not the kind of outdated transition I meant. But, you know, both did make me uncomfortable, and I guess the message here is that the transitions themselves aren't entirely the problem, but when out-of-touch movie directors from the 2000s try to portray them, things go off the rails really fast.
The idea of exploring Leprechaun's origins is not a bad one, and though it was touched upon in Leprechaun 2's interesting opening and has been through many iterations, a whole prequel film dedicated to it could be really good. Well, good by Leprechaun movie standards. And that's what we got in 2014, with this movie strangely enough involving WWE Studios, and their lack of competence is immediately put on full display in an opening that uses an embarrassing amount of shaky cam, has absolutely no build-up, and is all around incredibly lame. However, after that headache-inducing crap is over, we're introduced very methodically to our characters. The shots of the Irish countryside are beautiful, and in general the presentation here is good. Many scenes have some good shots and lighting choices, and other than the camera during action scenes having an absolute seizure, they did a good job in this area. I also like the more grounded tone and the way we're very slowly eased into everything. Sure, it may get boring at times, but the setup of exploring the history of an old isolated Irish town is actually pretty compelling. Though the characters aren't really good per se, they're fine enough and much better than some of the others in this franchise. I also like this old Irish guy, and in general, the actors do a pretty good job, outside of Mr. Coldplay over here, though I do feel like the Irishman is probably secretly evil.
And I swear I'm not just assuming that to be racist or anything.
Once our protagonists get to their cabin, they turn in for the night. However, one girl sees something strange outside, and in a stroke of absolutely stunning logic, she immediately wants to leave. Not just this, but the other girl critiques the Coldplay-looking guy for trying to go search after it like a dumbass. Wow, these two are actually not that dumb, at least in this scene, and what ensues is a decently effective, intense build-up revealing that the Irish guy locked them in there. I felt pretty good knowing that I saw that coming, but this scene is unfortunately where the movie stops being promising. The monster is revealed right after, and it's a stupid-looking bat monster that doesn't talk and has the alien POV shot from Alien 3. Oh god. There's not a ton to even say about the movie after this. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen, and there are some good things, I guess, but overall it's boring, stupid, and has nothing to do with Leprechaun. They claim the monster is a leprechaun, but that just hurts the film. It would probably just be a generic subpar horror movie if they didn't slap the name and singular reference to leprechaun on it. There are tons of awful action scenes with truly unbearable camera work that just made me want to turn the movie off, and it really doesn't need to be as long of a movie as it is. However, I will praise them for two things. First is that the antagonists, by which I mean the Irish father and son who tried to feed these folks to the monster, are played very well and have an interesting moral dilemma to them, since they need to keep the monster fed to survive, but to do so they have to sacrifice innocent people. It's actually intriguing. The second thing is that there are one or two good kills in here. This axe one is great because it made me laugh out loud, even though they didn't intend for that, and the guy's stomach being slashed and the other one's spine being taken out are brutal, creative kills with some nice effects. Not too shabby. But otherwise, this movie is just worthless trash. It's not like the previous movies where, even though they were often crap, they were funny and charming at many points. This is trying to be a 100% serious movie, and though it starts out decently and has some potential, it just devolves into repetitive, unnecessary crap. You know it's bad when they blur every shot involving the monster because even they knew it looked like shit. It's all topped off with the insulting and nonsensical reuse of the Lucky Charms line from the first movie.
Fuck you, Lucky Charms!
Followed by a laughably bad effect of the monster being decapitated and a frankly dumbass cliffhanger ending. So yeah, this movie isn't exactly going into the Criterion collection. I don't recommend this one. It's not as obtusely awful as the fourth movie, but it's boring, uninteresting, and an insult to this franchise, and insulting this franchise is, well, that's quite an achievement. 1 out of 5. The final film on our journey today is none other than 2018's Leprechaun Returns, which was made by Sci-Fi. Uh-oh. Well, actually, things start out very promising. This movie is the only one in the whole series to follow significant continuity from a previous entry, namely the first one. This is a requel in the same vein as Halloween 2018 or those recent Scream movies, at least I think. I haven't seen them. I like having some actually cohesive continuity, and the inclusion of Ozzy as a returning character played by the same actor is really great. But it's not just stuck in the past. The new protagonist is quite likable and sympathetic. She's not as good as the guy from In the Hood, but she's clever, doesn't do many dumb things, and is played extremely well. And in fact, the actors do a fantastic job all around, even when tasked with playing intentionally idiotic or shallow characters. For example, these two girls are at times very stupid and awkward, yet they're played with a healthy dose of self-awareness to the point that it almost feels like a parody, and that's great. This also extends to this guy, who's your typical dumb jock character, but it's done 100% intentionally. The only area where the movie fails on this front a bit is Meredith, a character who's your average mean girl, and while that's mostly okay, there are some things she does that are just stupid, such as trusting the leprechaun and trapping the main girl in the basement in exchange for her safety. And speaking of which, this movie actually has a leprechaun in it. He may not be played by Warwick Davis, and this new actor sadly doesn't hold a candle to his predecessor, but he still does a good job overall and has a truly fantastic modern design. What I really love, though, is how this movie is basically just a solid modern-day slasher with a dab of great humor. It's got the funny gags and references that made the first 3 movies somewhat watchable, but so much more.
I love the smell of me gold in the morning.
Leprechaun's lines here are super funny at times, and it makes the movie fit right in with other irreverent horror movies in our current era, rather than feeling like a strange, low-budget knockoff.
Gross. You give great head.
Seriously, this movie had the most laugh-out-loud moments and scenes for me out of the whole series outside of Leprechaun 2, but also managed to be a flat-out good horror film.
If Werner Herzog can do it, so can I.
Werner Herzog would be proud.
Thanks.
But let's talk about why this is all even going on. Why and how does Leprechaun return? Well, the daughter of Jennifer Aniston is actually our main character, which is almost hard to believe.
I can help you.
Thanks.
Careful, Matt. Sounds like Lila's mother was crazy and that shit's hereditary.
I don't know about that, because clearly, judging by these two, likability isn't a hereditary trait at all.
When she goes to the old house from the first movie and tries to turn it into a sorority house for her and a few other classmates from college, she's given a ride there by Ozzy, who ends up inhaling a substance from the well, and, well, this scene is seriously incredible. Leprechaun crawls out of his stomach. It's a truly brutal kill and a fantastic way to reintroduce the Green Menace. I love it. Well, I don't love that Ozzy died, he didn't deserve that, but it gives way for this movie to even exist. Then, on a classic hunt to reclaim his gold, Leprechaun goes on a killing spree all over, which isn't the most original, but we've just seen what too much originality can do to this franchise, so I'm fine with a back-to-basics approach. What's really great here isn't just the self-aware humor, good look, and great effects of the film, and likable characters, but the kills themselves. It becomes a legitimately compelling slasher film where every, and I mean every kill, is absolutely fantastic. Like, honestly, it's hard to even think of one particular highlight. They're all so good and creative. I can't just go through all of them, but if I had to pick a top 3, they'd be the following. First up, we have the sprinkler kill, which is whimsical and has a musical quality to it, gives the annoying Meredith what she's got coming, and is just a treat all around. I've never seen someone killed with a sprinkler before, and the detail of it shooting out blood is super clever, and the very, very red cherry on top. My second pick would have to be the solar panel kill, where this douchebag gets sliced in half. It's really gross, but has truly incredible effects, is a very creative idea, and also gets set up in a smart way earlier in the film, since this guy was the one who improperly installed the solar panels in the first place. Finally, if I'm not counting Ozzy's death, I'm going to go ahead with the scene of the little leprechauns tormenting this girl and getting her to trip onto her own trophy, which impales her. The effects in this scene can be a little shoddy at times, which is surprising, but the way this trophy is also foreshadowed earlier on, and the fact it reminds me a lot of Army of Darkness, gives it the edge. But after all that carnage, we're treated to a pretty great finale. They come up with an alright plan to trick Leprechaun, and though the scene of them trapping him in a circle of iron has some awkward editing, the way they eventually kill him by filling him up with clover-infused booze is just a delightful way to finish off the movie.
So yeah, this movie is... Wait, what? It's not over?
Yeah, he comes back, which does lead to the scene with the mini leprechauns, as well as a second final showdown, That's alright, but nowhere near as good as when they blew up his body. Even a cool house explosion at the end doesn't stop me from thinking they should have just ended things with his first death, especially because this final line is honestly a worthy successor to Fuck You, Lucky Charms.
I wish you'd just die already. One Shamrock Shake coming up.
But oh well, this movie's quite flawed, it's got some dumb and iffy moments, and it's not the most revolutionary thing I've ever seen, but it's funny, entertaining, has a solid cast, and stands toe-to-toe with various other, more notable modern slasher films. I can't believe it, but this is an actually good movie. Who would have thought that fucking sci-fi would make the best Leprechaun movie ever? But yeah, that's what this is. It's not even a contest. This is a great time, and I would gladly watch it again. 3.5 out of 5. I guess we found the gold at the end of the rainbow.
Man, kind of sad that that's all for the Leprechaun this year. I mean, no man ended on a high note and all, but that just made me excited for more sequels that don't exist.
Oh, don't worry, me boy. There's a lot more of me coming your way.
Wait, really?
Yeah, I actually got bought out by Warner, and they're going to produce a whole bunch of Leprechaun movies for their streaming service, Max.
Oh my god, that's awesome, but I can't believe they bet on someone as broke as you. No offense.
Yeah, and the same day they also laid off 1,000 employees and canceled 20 beloved animated series. I guess they just love making stupid fucking bullshit decisions.
Wow, so what can I be expecting? Annual releases?
More.
2 a year?
More.
A whole trilogy back to back? Like Fear Street?
No, I actually am going to be part of an entirely new franchise called the Lepreverse, where every single possible idea from a previous archetype or genre is going to be lazily recycled in order to crap out dozens of unwatchable movies.
Oh no.
Oh yes.
Oh, no. No. No, no, no.
And that was the moment I realized I never should have let that green little jerk stick his shillelagh in any of my discs.